My daughter called me on a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of call I always picked up on the first ring because I never stopped being her dad. "Hey, sweetheart," I said. There was a pause. Not the kind where someone is thinking. The kind where someone already knows what they're about to say and is deciding how to say it. "Dad." Her voice was flat. "I just wanted to let you know. The salon had its soft opening last weekend. It went really well." I sat down. Not because my legs gave out, because my brain needed a second to process what she had just said in the most casual tone imaginable, like she was telling me the weather. "Last weekend," I repeated. "Yeah, Saturday. It was small, just close friends and family." I looked at the calendar on my kitchen wall. My daughter's salon opening had been circled in red marker for 3 months. I had circled it myself, back when she first told me they were looking at a space in Asheville, back when she still called me to share good news. "I wasn't invited," I said. "It wasn't a question." Another pause. "We kept it really intimate, Dad. You know how Marcus is. He doesn't like big crowds." "Marcus?" "My son-in-law. The man my daughter had married 4 years ago in a ceremony I attended alone, sat in the back row alone, and drove home alone. Because by then, things had already started to shift in ways I couldn't quite name yet." "I see," I said. "Don't make it weird," she said. "I'll send you pictures." She sent me pictures. I looked at them for about 30 seconds. My daughter was smiling the way she used to smile when she was 7 and had just learned to ride a bike. Her husband had his arm around her like a fence post, present but unmoved. There were maybe 20 people in the photos, people I didn't recognize, people who had been deemed important enough. I set my phone face down on the kitchen table and sat there in the quiet. I want to be clear about something before I go any further. I am not the kind of man who talks about money. I was raised by a father who thought discussing finances was almost as rude as discussing religion at the dinner table. So when I tell you what I'm about to tell you, understand that it does not come easily to me. But I've learned too late, maybe, that staying quiet about money, when money is the thing being used against you, is not dignity. It's just silence that benefits the wrong people. My daughter's name is Serena. She's 36 years old. She has her mother's eyes and, I used to think, her mother's heart. Her mother passed 8 years ago, breast cancer, 14 months from diagnosis to the end. After that, it was just the two of us. Serena met Marcus at a company event. He was in sales. She was in marketing. They dated for 2 years, got engaged, and married in a small ceremony in western North Carolina. I liked Marcus well enough in the beginning. He was charming in the way that certain men are charming, smooth at the surface, hard to read underneath. He called me sir for the first year and then stopped, and I told myself that was just familiarity. The salon was Serena's dream. She had talked about it since she was in her 20s, a high-end hair and beauty studio, the kind with exposed brick and good lighting and a carefully curated menu of services. She had the eye for it. She had the personality for it. What she didn't have, when the opportunity finally came, was the capital. She called me on a Sunday morning, about 3.5 years ago now. "Dad, I need to talk to you about something. Marcus and I found a space. It's perfect, but we're short." "How short?" I asked. There was a pause. She did that thing even then, and she said, "About 40,000 to get started. Maybe a little more, depending on build-out." I had money set aside. Not a fortune, but I had been careful my whole life. 31 years as a civil engineer for the county. I had a pension, a modest IRA, and a savings account I had built up slowly and deliberately. I also had, sitting in a separate account, a sum I had been saving since Serena was born, money I always thought of as hers eventually, for a house down payment, or a business, or an emergency I hoped would never come. I told her yes. I told her yes without hesitation, because that's what you do. That's what I believed then. The first transfer was $42,000. It went out on a Thursday. By Monday, Marcus had sent me a spreadsheet with projected returns and a timeline for repayment. It was detailed, professional-looking, and I want to tell you honestly, I never expected to see that money back. It wasn't a loan in my heart. It was a gift. I just didn't say that out loud because I didn't want to embarrass them. 6 months later, there were complications. The build-out ran over. A piece of equipment was back-ordered and then arrived damaged. There was a permitting issue with the city. Marcus called me, not Serena, Marcus, and explained the situation in the measured tone of a man who had rehearsed the conversation. They needed another $15,000 to get through the next quarter. I sent it. 8 months after that, Serena called to say they were fully operational, but cash flow was tight during the ramp-up period. Could I cover their mortgage for 3 months while the business stabilized? Just their mortgage. Just 3 months. $9,000. I sent it. I want to stop here and tell you that during all of this, I was also watching something else happen slowly, the way you watch a fog roll in off the mountains. Gradual enough that you keep telling yourself it's just weather. I stopped being invited to Sunday dinners. First it was scheduling, then it was the renovation stress, then it was just nothing. No explanation. The dinners stopped and no one acknowledged that they had stopped. Serena called less. When she did call, the conversations had a quality to them that I can only describe as managed. She was warm but contained, like she was speaking to me through a screen door. I drove to Asheville twice that first year to see the salon before it opened. Marcus was always there, always busy, always just slightly too occupied to sit and talk. The second time I visited, I brought lunch, barbecue from a place I knew she loved, and we ate standing up in the back of the shop while he took a phone call in the other room that lasted 45 minutes. I drove the 4 hours home telling myself this was just the pressure of a startup. I had read enough about small businesses to know the first year can break people. I gave it room. What I didn't give enough room to was the voice in my chest that said something was wrong in a way that had nothing to do with business stress. The salon opened. I found out from a photograph on social media, posted by someone I didn't know, tagged at my daughter's studio with a champagne glass and a caption about supporting local women entrepreneurs. I scrolled through the comments. 23 likes. Several people I'd never heard of congratulating her. A photo of the front window with the lettering she had picked out. I called her. She didn't pick up. She texted me 20 minutes later, in the middle of something. Talk soon. She called back 2 days later. That was when she told me it was the soft opening, that it was intimate, that Marcus didn't like crowds. That was the Tuesday I sat at my kitchen table with my phone face down, recalculating everything I thought I understood. I want you to know I didn't call her back angry. I didn't write a long message. I'm 64 years old, and I have buried my wife, and I have learned that the worst decisions I have ever made were made in the first hour of a feeling. So I waited. I gave myself 3 days. On the 4th day, I called my financial advisor. I told him I was restructuring some of my giving. I asked him what the most efficient way was to redirect the automatic transfers I had set up for the past 3 years. A modest monthly amount I had been sending to help with operational expenses, something Marcus had set up at his suggestion, pulled from my checking account on the 1st of every month. My advisor asked how much. $800 a month, I said. He was quiet for a second and then said, "Okay, I can help you with that." I canceled the transfer. It wasn't dramatic. It was just a phone call. 2 weeks later, Marcus called me. Not Serena. Marcus. He didn't say hello. He said, "The account is short. Did you forget to send the transfer?" I said I hadn't forgotten. I said I had decided to stop. The silence on his end was a different kind than Serena's silences. Hers was soft, evasive. His was hard. "That money is part of our operating budget," he said. "I understand that it has been," I said, "but it won't be going forward." "We factored it in," he said. "You can't just stop without notice." I want to tell you that I stayed very calm. I had thought about this moment. Not because I am a cold man, but because I knew it was coming, somewhere in the back of my mind, and I had decided how I wanted to be when it arrived. "Marcus," I said, "I wasn't invited to my daughter's salon opening. I was not invited to their wedding rehearsal dinner. I send $800 a month out of my retirement savings, and the last time I had a real conversation with my daughter longer than 5 minutes was in February. I'm going to stop the transfers." He said that wasn't a real reason. I said I disagreed. He said Serena was going to be upset. I said I hoped she would call me. She did call me 3 days later, and it was one of the hardest conversations of my life, not because she was cruel. She wasn't, not exactly, but because she was so clearly speaking from a script that wasn't hers. She said things that used his cadence, his logic, his framing. She said I was being selfish. She said I was punishing her for something she didn't do. She said that after everything they had been through with the business, she couldn't believe I would withdraw support at such a critical time. I listened to all of it. Then I said, "Serena, I love you. I have loved you since before you took your first breath, but I need you to hear me right now. I gave this family more than $66,000 over 3 years. I attended your wedding. I drove 8 hours round trip twice to help with the build-out. And I was not invited to the opening of the business I helped fund. I am not angry, but I am not going to keep sending money into a relationship where I am not welcome." She said, "It wasn't about you." "I know," I said. "That's the part that hurts." She hung up. I thought that was the end of it. I thought the way you think things when you're still operating on old assumptions, that there would be a cooling-off period. And then she would call, and we would find our way back to something. Not what we had, maybe, but something. Instead, 2 months later, I received a certified letter. I signed for it on a Friday morning in my driveway, still in my robe, holding a coffee cup, not yet understanding what I was looking at. The return address was a law firm in Asheville. Inside was a demand letter signed by an attorney, claiming that the funds I had transferred over the 3-year period constituted a formal loan supported by the spreadsheet Marcus had sent me in year 1, and that my cessation of the monthly transfers represented a breach of an implied financial agreement, causing material harm to their business. They were demanding repayment of the $800 per month for the 8 months I had failed to perform, plus damages. $6,400 in backowed support payments, plus damages. I stood in my driveway for a long time. Then I went inside, poured the rest of my coffee down the sink, and called my attorney. Her name is Beverly. She's 70 years old, has been practicing law for 42 years, and has the kind of face that suggests she has seen everything and is not particularly surprised by any of it. I told her the whole story. I told her about the transfers, the spreadsheet, the missed opening, the missed rehearsal dinner, the calls that stopped. I told her about Marcus's call, Serena's call, and the demand letter. Beverly read the letter while I waited. Then she said, "This is a reach." I asked what that meant in practical terms. She said it meant they didn't have a case, but that didn't mean they wouldn't try. A spreadsheet sent by email with projected returns did not constitute a loan agreement. There was no signed promissory note. There were no stated interest terms. There were no repayment dates. What they had was a document Marcus had made and sent, unilaterally, that I had never countersigned. What they're counting on, Beverly said, is that you'll settle to make it go away. I asked her what she recommended. "Don't settle," she said, "and save every text message, every email, every transfer record, every voicemail. All of it." I'd kept everything. I am an engineer. I keep records. The next 4 months were some of the quietest months of my life, which sounds strange given the circumstances, but it's true. The legal process moved slowly. Beverly sent a response letter. They responded. There were negotiations I wasn't part of directly. Exchanges between attorneys that Beverly summarized for me in calm, plain language. I went about my life. I tended my garden. I had dinner with my neighbor Walter on Thursday nights. I read. I slept better than I expected to. What I did not do was call Serena. I wanted to. I want to be honest about that. There were nights when I sat in the chair by the window where I used to read to her when she was small, and I thought about calling. I thought about it the way you think about a door you know is there, but can't open yet. I missed her with the particular ache of a parent who knows that the distance between you and your child is not geographical. But I also knew that until this was resolved, any contact could be used to complicate things. Beverly told me to hold off. I held off. The hearing was brief, not a full trial, a mediation session essentially, in a conference room with a mediator, both attorneys, Marcus and me. Serena did not attend. Marcus sat across the table from me for the first time in almost 8 months. He looked tired. He looked, if I'm being honest, like a man who had expected this to go differently by now. The mediator asked me to walk through the history of the financial transfers. I did. I had a binder. 12 months of bank statements, copies of every wire transfer, copies of the original text messages where Serena asked for help and I agreed, a copy of the spreadsheet Marcus had sent me, a note I had written to myself, dated the day I drove home from the second Asheville visit, describing the conversation we'd had standing in the back of the shop. I also had a copy of the social media post announcing the salon's soft opening, posted at 7:42 p.m. on a Saturday, 2 days after the event had already occurred. And I had a letter, handwritten, 1 page, that I asked Beverly's permission to read aloud. She said yes. It said, I gave this money because I am a father and because I believed in my daughter's dream. I did not give it as a loan. I gave it the way you give a piece of yourself, without a receipt, without a due date, without terms. I asked for nothing in return except to be treated as a member of this family. I was excluded from a rehearsal dinner. I was excluded from a grand opening. I was asked to continue sending money while being treated as someone whose presence was optional. I stopped the transfers when I understood that the relationship being funded was not one in which I existed as a person. I owe nothing under any agreement because no agreement was made. The spreadsheet was not a contract. It was a wish list. I have been a father for 36 years. I know the difference between a document and a promise. The mediator ruled in my favor. There was no dramatic moment, no gavel. Marcus gathered his folder. His attorney said something quietly. Marcus did not look at me when he stood up. Beverly shook my hand in the parking lot and said, "Go home and do something nice for yourself." I drove to a diner I like outside of Weaverville and ate a patty melt and drank 2 cups of coffee and watched the mountains through the window and didn't think about much of anything at all. Serena called me 3 weeks after the mediation. I picked up on the first ring because I never stopped being her dad. She didn't say hello. She said, "I didn't know about the letter." "Which letter?" I asked. "The one Marcus's lawyer sent you. I didn't know until after." I believed her. I don't know if that makes it better or worse. I think it makes it sadder. We talked for a long time, not about the money, not directly, about her mother. About a road trip we took when she was 12, just the 2 of us, down the Blue Ridge Parkway, stopping at every overlook because she had read about them in a magazine and wanted to see every single one, about how tired she sounded, about how Marcus had been under pressure for years that she hadn't fully understood when she was in the middle of it. I did not ask her to leave him. That is not my choice to make. I did tell her that I was her father and that I would always answer the phone. I told her that I was not going to keep funding a life that I wasn't allowed to be part of. She said she understood. I don't know if she does yet. I think understanding takes longer than a phone call. But she called, and I answered, and we talked until the sun was almost gone, and that meant something. It meant a lot, actually. I live alone in a house that has more rooms than I need. I have a good pension and a garden that gets more of my attention than it used to. My neighbor Walter comes for dinner on Thursdays and we argue about baseball, and it is the best part of my week. I do not know what happens next with my daughter. I know that I am not closing the door. I am just not walking through it in the dark anymore, carrying things no one asked me to set down. I sold my father's pocket watch the year after my wife died to cover an unexpected expense, and I have regretted it every day since. I will not sell anything else that matters to buy my way into a room where I am not truly welcome. If she calls, I will answer. That's all I know how to do. It has always been enough to be worth doing. There's a moment I keep coming back to. I'm standing in my driveway in my robe holding a coffee cup that's going cold, looking at a certified letter from a law firm in Asheville, and I remember thinking, not with anger, just with a kind of quiet clarity, that this is exactly what happens when you let love become a transaction for someone else, while pretending it isn't one for you. I gave Serena money because I wanted to, because I believed in her, because when you're a parent, giving is the most natural thing in the world, and nobody warns you that it can become the rope someone else uses to tie you in place. I don't regret the giving. I regret that I didn't pay closer attention to what was being built around it. What I've come to understand, sitting in that diner outside Weaverville, watching the mountains, eating a patty melt I didn't taste, is that the choices we make eventually make us. Marcus made choices. Serena made choices. I made choices too for years. Every time I transferred money without saying what I actually felt. Every time I drove home from Asheville telling myself it was just business stress. Those choices had weight. They accumulated. They produced exactly the outcome they were always going to produce. That's not fate. That's just math. I think about the kind of man I had to be to get through those months. The mediation, the silence, the nights in the chair by the window where I used to read to her. It wasn't stubbornness that got me through. It was something older and quieter than that. It was the discipline to not act from the worst hour of a feeling, to know what I knew, say what needed to be said, and then let the truth stand on its own without me propping it up with anger or pleading. There is a version of this story where I write a long emotional letter, or call Marcus back and argue or settle the claim just to make the discomfort stop. I know that version. I've watched other people live it. It doesn't end anywhere good. The version I chose required me to be honest with myself before I was honest with anyone else, to look at $66,000 and 12 years of silence and admit that I had contributed to this, not by being cruel, but by being so committed to peace that I had funded a distance I should have named out loud years earlier. That kind of honesty takes something out of you, and then it gives something back. I still don't know where Serena and I end up. She calls more now. The conversations are careful, like people walking on ice that hasn't been tested yet. But they're real. She's in there, underneath all of it. The daughter who wanted to stop at every overlook on the Blue Ridge Parkway because she had read about them in a magazine and wanted to see every single one. I haven't stopped believing that. What I know is this. I am 64 years old and I have one life, the same as everyone. I am not going to spend what's left of it being grateful for crumbs from people I helped build a table for. That's not bitterness. That's just finally knowing what I'm worth and being willing to act like it.